The Silent Architects. Commander Rachel Morgan stood in the observation deck of Coalition Station Zenith, watching the endless dance of starships moving through the void. Each vessel represented a different species from across the galaxy, all united under the banner of the Galactic Coalition. Or so the official motto claimed. Rachel had served the Coalition for 15 years, ever since humanity had been granted membership. She remembered the excitement of that day, the hope that Earth would finally take its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. Her younger self had believed in the dream of unity, of species working together to solve the universe's greatest mysteries. Now, at 42, Rachel understood the truth. Humanity had a place in the Coalition, but it was not the place they had imagined. The door behind her opened with a soft hiss. Lieutenant David Park entered carrying a data tablet, his expression weary. Rachel recognized that look. She had seen it on the faces of human personnel throughout the station for months now. "Commander, the logistics report you requested," David said, handing her the tablet. "All 17 sectors are running smoothly. The food distribution networks are optimized, waste management is functioning at peak efficiency, and the atmospheric processors have been recalibrated across the entire station." Rachel scrolled through the data. It was impressive work, as always. Human teams had transformed the Coalition's infrastructure from barely functional to remarkably efficient. Yet she knew what would happen when she presented this report to the High Council. "Thank you, David. Get some rest. You look exhausted." David hesitated at the doorway. "Commander, is it true? Are the Archons calling another emergency session?" Rachel nodded slowly. "The resonance crisis is getting worse. They're gathering the council to discuss solutions. Will they want our input this time?" Rachel did not answer immediately. She thought about the last 6 emergency sessions, where human representatives had been politely asked to wait outside while the elder species deliberated. She thought about the detailed reports her team had prepared, reports that were accepted with condescending nods and then filed away without being read. "I don't know, David. But we'll prepare our data anyway. It's what we do." After David left, Rachel returned to the window. In the distance, she could see the crystalline spires of the Archon Citadel, where the most ancient and powerful species governed the Coalition. The Archons had founded the Coalition 3,000 years ago, bringing together dozens of species under a single unified government. They were beings of pure energy, existing in forms that most species could barely comprehend. Below them in the hierarchy were the Kelthane, massive creatures with multiple brains working in perfect synchronization. They handled scientific research and technological development. Then came the Vortian, beings who communicated through controlled gravity waves, managing the Coalition's military and defense systems. Humanity occupied a different tier entirely. They were classified as support personnel, specialists in practical implementation and maintenance. The official designation made it sound important, but Rachel knew what it really meant. Humans were the janitors, the cooks, the mediators, the ones who did the unglamorous work that kept everything running. The emergency alarm began pulsing through the station, a low rhythmic tone that signaled all council members to gather. Rachel straightened her uniform and headed toward the assembly chamber. Whatever was about to happen, humanity would be there, ready to help even if their help was not wanted. The council chamber was a vast spherical room where representatives from every Coalition species could gather. Rachel entered with her small team and immediately noticed the seating arrangement. The inner circle was reserved for the elder species, the Archons, Kelthane, and Vortian. The middle circles held the more established civilizations. Humans were assigned seats in the outer ring, so far from the center that they needed visual enhancers to see the speakers clearly. Archon Thelius materialized at the center of the chamber, a being of shifting light and complex energy patterns. When it spoke, the words formed directly in the minds of all present, translated perfectly into each species' native thought patterns. "The resonance crisis has reached critical levels," Thelius began. 17 star systems have reported complete communication failures. Ships are losing navigation capabilities. Even our most advanced quantum networks are experiencing inexplicable disruptions. A Kelthane scientist named Vormuth extended several of its neural tendrils. Our analysis suggests this is a fundamental breakdown in subspace coherence. The very fabric of faster-than-light communication is becoming unstable. Rachel leaned forward, studying the data that appeared on the holographic displays around the chamber. She had been reading about the resonance crisis for months, following reports that the elder species had largely dismissed as minor technical glitches. Now those glitches had grown into a threat that could tear the galaxy apart. Her team had done their own research, approaching the problem from a different angle. While the elder species focused on the physics of subspace, humans had noticed something else. The disruptions seemed to follow patterns, almost like a living system responding to stimuli. Dr. Sarah Chen, humanity's lead physicist, had developed a theory that the subspace network was not breaking down randomly but was actually reacting to how it was being used. Rachel raised her hand to request permission to speak, following the proper protocols. She waited as several elder species presented their theories, each more complex and theoretical than the last. Finally, after nearly an hour, Archon Thelius acknowledged her presence. The human delegation wishes to contribute. The tone was not unkind, but there was an unmistakable note of condescension in the thought patterns. Rachel stood. Honored Archons, esteemed council members, human research teams have been studying the resonance crisis from a systems perspective. We have data suggesting that the disruptions are not random failures but adaptive responses. The subspace network may be reacting defensively to the stress we are placing on it. Vormutha's neural tendrils waved in what Rachel had learned to recognize as dismissal. Subspace is not a living entity. It cannot react or respond. These are fundamental forces of physics, not biological systems. With respect, Rachel continued, complex systems can exhibit emergent behaviors that resemble conscious responses without being truly alive. Our data shows clear patterns in how and when the disruptions occur. They seem to intensify in regions with the highest traffic and the most forceful quantum manipulation. Primitive anthropomorphization, another Kelthane scientist interjected. Your species sees life and consciousness everywhere because your evolution optimized you for social interaction, not scientific rigor. Rachel felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her composure. We have compiled 6 months of detailed observations and predictive models. If the Council would review our data. Your data has been noted, Archon Thelius interrupted gently. We appreciate humanity's enthusiasm. However, this crisis requires solutions based on advanced theoretical physics, not intuitive speculation. The elder species will continue our analysis. Human personnel should focus on maintaining station operations and preparing evacuation protocols in case they become necessary. Rachel sat down, her face carefully neutral. Around her, the rest of the human delegation showed no reaction, but she could feel their quiet frustration. Once again, their work had been dismissed without examination. Once again, they had been patted on the head and sent back to their proper place. The council session continued for another 3 hours. Rachel listened as the elder species debated increasingly complex solutions. They proposed massive quantum dampening fields, artificial subspace stabilizers, and even experimental techniques to reinforce the fabric of reality itself. Each solution was more ambitious and more resource-intensive than the last. What none of them discussed was the possibility that they might be wrong about the fundamental nature of the problem. When the session finally ended, Rachel gathered her team in a small conference room far from the main corridors. There were 12 of them, representing the senior human personnel on the station. They were scientists, engineers, doctors, and diplomats who had spent years serving the coalition faithfully. They're going to make it worse, Dr. Chen said immediately. Every solution they proposed involves applying more force to subspace, more aggressive manipulation. If my theory is correct, that will only intensify the defensive reactions. Your theory isn't being considered, reminded Marcus Webb, the human medical director. To them, it's just primitive intuition. Rachel looked around the room at tired faces and discouraged eyes. How bad is it really? Give me your honest assessment. Dr. Chen pulled up a holographic display. If they implement their quantum dampening fields as planned, I estimate we have 6 months before total subspace collapse. Communications will fail completely. Faster-than-light travel will become impossible. The coalition will fragment into isolated systems with no way to contact each other. And if they listen to our approach? Rachel asked. We might be able to stabilize the network by reducing stress on the system, implementing gentler protocols, and allowing natural recovery periods. It would mean slower communication and more careful resource management, but the network could heal itself over time. Might, Rachel repeated. You're not certain. No one can be certain about something this complex. But our models are based on actual observation, not just theory. We've been watching the system behave for months while they've been running simulations. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. She thought about 15 years of service, of humanity's desperate attempts to prove their worth to the galaxy. She thought about the countless times human insights have been dismissed, only for the elder species to arrive at similar conclusions months or years later and claim credit for the discovery. She thought about the fundamental assumption underlying the coalition structure, that older civilizations were inherently wiser, that advancement could be measured purely in years and technology. She thought about how that assumption had blinded the elder species to perspectives that did not match their expectations. Commander, David said quietly, what are we going to do? Rachel made a decision then, one that she had been approaching for months without consciously realizing it. We're going to prepare 2 sets of protocols. One for if they ask for our help, with detailed instructions on how to implement the gentle approach. And one for if they don't. And if they don't? Marcus asked. Then we go home, Rachel said simply. We've spent 15 years trying to contribute to a civilization that doesn't want our contributions. Maybe it's time to stop trying. The room fell silent. No one objected. No one argued that they should stay and keep fighting for recognition. They were all too tired, too worn down by years of being treated as lesser beings despite their competence. We don't leave in anger, Rachel continued. We don't make demands or ultimatums. We simply prepare for the possibility that the coalition doesn't need us. And if that turns out to be true, we quietly return to human space and let them solve their problems without our interference. What about all the systems we maintain? Asked Jennifer Okoye, the infrastructure coordinator. The food networks, waste management, atmospheric processing, diplomatic facilitation. We document everything thoroughly, Rachel replied. We train replacements if they'll accept training. We leave detailed instructions for every system, every protocol, every little adjustment that keeps things running smoothly. We do our jobs professionally until the last moment. But we don't stay where we're not valued. Over the next weeks, Rachel watched the crisis unfold exactly as Dr. Chen had predicted. The Council implemented their quantum dampening fields, massive installations that attempted to stabilize subspace through brute force. Initially, they seemed to work. The disruptions decreased in the affected regions. Then, like a spring compressed too tightly, the network snapped back. The disruptions returned twice as strong, spreading to previously unaffected areas. Ships lost navigation across entire sectors. Colonies lost contact with their home worlds. The carefully maintained communication network that connected the galaxy began to fragment. Through it all, human personnel continued their work. They kept the stations running, the food flowing, the conflicts mediated. They trained their replacements patiently, even though those replacements often resented being taught by species they considered inferior. They documented their procedures in exhaustive detail, trying to capture not just what they did but why they did it. Rachel submitted 3 more reports to the Council, each one explaining why their approach was failing and offering alternatives. Each report was received politely and filed away without serious consideration. In her private quarters late one night, Rachel received a message from Earth. Admiral Catherine Stone, the human liaison to Coalition Command, appeared on the screen. Commander Morgan, I've been reviewing your reports. I've also been hearing similar stories from human personnel throughout Coalition space. It seems we're facing a pattern here. Yes, Admiral, Rachel replied carefully. Earth government has authorized a withdrawal protocol. Not mandatory, you understand. But we're prepared to bring everyone home if that's what they choose. We've built a good civilization in our own space. We don't need the Coalition's approval to thrive. Rachel felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten it was there. When would this happen? That's up to you and the other site commanders. We're ready when you are. But Rachel, if you do this, there's no coming back. The Coalition won't take kindly to mass resignation. I understand, Admiral. Give me 2 weeks to discuss it with our people. The conversation she had with the human personnel on the station took less than an hour. When she explained the option to return to human space, to stop fighting for recognition that would never come, every single person voted to leave. They did not shout or complain. They did not issue angry statements or make dramatic gestures. They simply began the quiet process of packing their things, finishing their training programs, and saying goodbye to the few non-human friends they had made. Rachel scheduled one final meeting with Archon Thelius. She entered the private chamber where the energy being weighted, its form pulsing with colors that indicated curiosity. Commander Morgan, I was surprised by your request for this meeting. Do you have new data on the crisis? No, honored Archon. I came to inform you that all human personnel will be departing Coalition space within 72 hours. We are resigning our positions and returning to Earth territory. The colors of Thelius's form shifted to confusion, then concern. This is unexpected. Has there been some problem we are unaware of? Rachel chose her words carefully. We have served the Coalition faithfully for 15 years. We have maintained your infrastructure, facilitated your diplomacy, and contributed our perspectives to your challenges. But it has become clear that our contributions are not valued in the way we had hoped. Rather than remain where we are not truly wanted, we have chosen to return to our own space. Not wanted? Commander, human personnel have been exemplary in their assigned roles. Yes. In our assigned roles. We were invited to join the Coalition as equal members, but we have been treated as support staff. Our insights are dismissed, our research ignored, our perspectives considered primitive. We have tried to prove our worth, but we have realized that to you, worth is measured in age and technology, not in competence or contribution. Thelius was quiet for a long moment. The elder species must lead. That is the natural order of advancement. Perhaps it is, Rachel replied. But we no longer wish to follow. We will complete our duties, train our replacements, and leave full documentation of all our procedures. We bear no ill will toward the Coalition. We simply choose to build our future elsewhere. And if we ask you to reconsider, then we would ask you to truly value what we bring, not just the tasks we perform. But we both know that will not happen. Your civilization is built on assumptions about superiority and advancement that leave no room for species like us to be truly equal partners. Rachel left the meeting feeling lighter than she had in years. Around the station, human personnel worked their final shifts with quiet efficiency. They did not sabotage or complain. They did their jobs exactly as they always had, right up until the moment they walked away. 72 hours later, the last human transport departed Coalition Station Zenith. Rachel stood on the bridge, watching the massive structure shrink in the view screen. It was beautiful, a triumph of engineering and cooperation. She hoped they would manage to keep it running without the steady human hands that had maintained it for so long. Course set for Earth, Commander, the pilot reported. Take us home, Rachel said quietly. Behind them, the Coalition continued its stately existence, unaware of how much it was about to change. The resonance crisis continued to worsen. Systems that humans had maintained for years began their slow decline. Conflicts that human diplomats had quietly resolved flared up again. And humanity, for the first time in 15 years, turned its attention inward to building something of its own. The Reckoning of Silence. Archon Thelius hovered in the central command sphere of Coalition Station Zenith, observing the cascade of alerts flooding the monitoring systems. 3 months had passed since the humans departed, and the carefully maintained order of the Coalition was unraveling faster than anyone had predicted. The energy being shifted through several color spectrums, each representing different emotional states that few species could interpret. What Thelius felt was something entirely new in its 3,000-year existence: doubt. Status report, Thelius projected to the assembled department heads. Bournemouth, the Kelthane chief scientist, extended its neural tendrils in a pattern that indicated distress. The resonance crisis has expanded to 47 star systems. Our quantum dampening fields are failing across all sectors. Communication blackouts are lasting longer each cycle. What about the enhanced stabilization protocols we implemented last month? Thelius asked. They accelerated the degradation. Just as the human models predicted they would. Bournemouth's tendrils curled inward, a gesture of shame among its species. I have reviewed Dr. Chen's research extensively over the past weeks. Her approach was correct. We should have listened. Thelius did not respond immediately. Admitting error did not come naturally to a species that had led the galaxy for millennia. What other systems are experiencing difficulties? A Vortian military coordinator named Kelshra spoke through carefully modulated gravity waves. All sectors are reporting infrastructure failures. The food distribution networks are operating at 30% efficiency. Waste management systems are backing up across 12 major stations. Atmospheric processors are requiring manual resets every 6 hours instead of running autonomously. We have the technical manuals the humans left, Thelius said. Follow their documented procedures. We are following them, Honored Archon, Kelshra replied. But the manuals only describe what to do, not when or why. The humans made thousands of small adjustments that prevented problems before they occurred. They understood the systems intuitively in ways that our logical analysis cannot replicate. A young Archon named Velios, barely 800 years old, flickered into the command sphere. Perhaps we should contact the human government and request their return. We could offer better terms, more recognition. No, Thelius said firmly. The Coalition does not beg for assistance from younger species. We will solve these challenges through proper application of our superior knowledge and experience. But even as Thelius spoke, the energy being knew the words rang hollow. The Coalition's superior knowledge had led them to worsen the resonance crisis. Their experience had not prepared them for the sudden absence of human maintenance and mediation. Across the galaxy, the consequences of humanity's departure were becoming impossible to ignore. On the trade hub of Kelthra Prime, 2 merchant fleets from different species had begun shooting at each other over a misunderstanding about docking priorities. Without human mediators to translate not just words but intentions and cultural contexts, simple disagreements escalated into violence. The Kelthane and Vortian military forces had responded, but their intervention had only made things worse. They enforced rules and regulations without understanding the deeper issues, creating resentment instead of resolution. 3 trade wars had erupted in sectors that had been peaceful for decades. On Research Station Epsilon 7, the cafeteria had become a source of constant conflict. Different species had incompatible dietary requirements and cultural food taboos. Human nutritionists had somehow created menus that satisfied everyone, rotating schedules and preparation methods in ways that seemed simple but were actually extraordinarily complex. Now, with those humans gone, meal times had become battlegrounds of competing needs and hurt feelings. The medical facilities faced even graver challenges. Human doctors had possessed an unusual ability to treat multiple species effectively, understanding that physical symptoms were often connected to emotional and psychological states. The elder species physicians were technically competent, but they approached treatment as a purely mechanical process. Recovery rates had dropped by 40%, and patient satisfaction had plummeted. Thelius spent long hours reviewing the reports, watching the steady decline of everything humans had touched. The most troubling discovery was how much the humans had actually done, work that had been invisible because it was performed so smoothly. They had not just maintained systems, they had adapted, improvised, and constantly refined processes to work better. The elder species could follow instructions, but they could not innovate in the intuitive ways humans had. They understood what the manual said to do, but not why those particular steps mattered or when to deviate from protocol because circumstances had changed. 5 months after the departure, Thelius received an urgent summons from the Grand Council, the highest authority in the coalition. All 9 archons gathered in a quantum space that existed outside normal reality, where they could communicate at speeds impossible in the physical universe. The situation has become critical, declared Archon Primus, the eldest of their kind. We are losing member species. 12 civilizations have formally withdrawn from the coalition in the past month alone. They claim we can no longer provide the stability and prosperity we promised. The resonance crisis continues to spread, added Archon Kelios. We now have 81 systems completely cut off from faster-than-light communication. Entire regions of the galaxy are becoming isolated. And the humans? Thelius asked quietly. Thriving, Archon Miris responded, her energy patterns tinged with what might have been jealousy. Their territories show no signs of the resonance crisis. Their infrastructure operates flawlessly. They have even begun accepting refugees from failing coalition worlds. Species that once considered humans primitive are now begging for sanctuary in human space. How is this possible? Archon Primus demanded. They are a young species, barely 15,000 years old. They lack our technology, our understanding, our evolutionary advancement. Thelius had been studying this question extensively. They have something we lost millions of years ago, adaptability born from chaos. Our species evolved in stable environments where logic and order led to success. We optimized for consistency and predictability. Humans evolved on a violent, unpredictable world where survival required constant adaptation, emotional intelligence, and the ability to find novel solutions to unprecedented problems. Are you suggesting that primitiveness is somehow superior? Archon Kelios asked sharply. I am suggesting that we defined advancement too narrowly, Thelius replied. We measured it in years and technology, not in capability and contribution. The humans were not primitive. They were different. And we were too arrogant to see the value in that difference. The quantum space fell silent, a stillness that lasted several subjective hours while the Archons processed this revelation. Finally, Archon Primus spoke again. What do you recommend? We must acknowledge our error, Thelius said. We must contact Earth and request their assistance, not as subordinates but as equals. We must offer them true partnership in the coalition's leadership. Unacceptable, Archon Miris declared immediately. The elder species have led for 3,000 years. Our authority is absolute. To admit we need help from humans would undermine the entire foundation of our society. That foundation is crumbling already, Thelius countered. Pride will not save us. Only truth can do that. The debate continued for what would have been days in normal time. The Archons were divided. Some saw the necessity of change, while others clung to the old hierarchies. In the end, Archon Primus made the decision. We will not formally request their return. However, individual member species may pursue diplomatic contact with human territories as they see fit. The coalition will observe and learn from these interactions. It was a compromise that satisfied no one, but it was all the rigid hierarchy could bend without breaking entirely. Thelius returned to Coalition Station Zenith feeling the weight of wasted time. While they had debated, the crisis had deepened. The station itself was beginning to fail in ways that threatened the survival of everyone aboard. The waste management system had reached critical capacity. Without proper maintenance, toxic buildup was contaminating the water supply. The atmospheric processors were cycling incorrectly, creating pockets of unbreathable air throughout the residential sectors. The food production facilities were producing less each week as the delicate balance of nutrients and growing conditions drifted out of alignment. Thelius accessed the human maintenance manuals again, reading through thousands of pages of careful documentation. The instructions were clear and detailed. Yet somehow, following them precisely still led to system failures. It was as if the manuals described the notes of a song but could not convey the rhythm or feeling that made it music. In desperation, Thelius reached out to a contact that Rachel Morgan had left, a private communication channel to be used only in genuine emergency. The energy being hesitated before activating it, knowing that this action represented a personal admission of failure. Rachel's face appeared on the screen, older by half a year but somehow more relaxed than Thelius remembered. She was transmitting from a human colony world, not from Earth itself. Behind her, Thelius could see comfortable quarters with windows overlooking green landscapes. Archon Thelius, Rachel said neutrally. I did not expect to hear from you. Commander Morgan. I am contacting you in a personal capacity, not as an official representative of the coalition. I need to understand something. How did your species maintain our systems so effectively? We follow your manuals exactly, yet nothing works as it did when you were here. Rachel was quiet for a moment. May I speak honestly, even if my words are difficult to hear? Please do. You're following the manuals like they're rigid laws. But systems are living things in a sense. They respond to conditions, they develop quirks, they need adjustment based on feedback. The manuals tell you what we did, but they can't teach you how to listen to the machines, how to sense when something is slightly wrong before it becomes very wrong, how to make the small adjustments that prevent big failures. How did humans learn this? Thelius asked. By making mistakes and learning from them. By trusting our intuition even when we couldn't explain it logically. By understanding that perfect order is actually fragile, that systems need a little chaos to stay adaptable and resilient. Rachel paused. You asked us to be perfect, to follow protocols exactly, to think logically without emotion. We did those things, but underneath, we were still human. We still relied on instinct and feeling and improvisation. That's what kept everything running, not the protocols themselves. We believed those traits were weaknesses. They can be, if used poorly. But they can also be strengths. Evolution gave us emotional intelligence because it helped us survive in unpredictable environments. Your species evolved in stable conditions where logic was enough. Neither approach is wrong, but they're suited for different challenges. Thelius processed this information, comparing it against millions of years of assumptions about advancement and superiority. The resonance crisis is destroying us. Your Dr. Chen's approach was correct. We should have listened. Yes, you should have, Rachel said without satisfaction. But you didn't, and now you're paying the price. The question is, what will you do now? I do not know, Thelius admitted. The Grand Council refuses to acknowledge that we need human assistance. They believe admitting error would destroy our authority. Maybe it would, Rachel replied. Maybe your authority was built on foundations that weren't as solid as you believed. Change is painful, especially for beings who have existed for thousands of years without needing to change. But Thelius, the galaxy is changing whether you want it to or not. You can adapt, or you can become irrelevant. After the conversation ended, Thelius floated alone in the command sphere for a long time. The Archon watched the cascade of failures spreading across the displays, each one representing suffering and chaos that could have been prevented if the coalition had valued different perspectives. 8 months after humanity's departure, the coalition had lost 30% of its member species. The resonance crisis had isolated over 200 star systems. Infrastructure failures had forced the evacuation of 17 major stations. Trade networks had collapsed, leading to resource shortages on dozens of worlds. Minor conflicts had escalated into actual warfare in 5 sectors. Meanwhile, human territories were expanding. Species that had once looked down on humanity now sought immigration permits to human worlds. They discovered that human-administered systems ran smoothly, that human mediators resolved conflicts fairly, that human doctors treated not just bodies but whole beings. They found that the chaos and emotion they had considered primitive actually created more stable, adaptable, and resilient societies. The greatest irony was that humanity did not gloat or demand recognition. They simply continued building their own civilization, accepting refugees who asked for help, and quietly demonstrating through their success that there were many valid paths to advancement. Thelius made a personal decision then, one that would likely end its position on the Grand Council. The Archon opened a public communication channel, broadcasting to all coalition members. I am Archon Thelius, and I must speak a difficult truth. The coalition is failing because we built our civilization on the assumption that age equals wisdom and that logic surpasses emotion. We were wrong. Humanity showed us a different path, and we were too proud to recognize its value. They maintained our systems, resolved our conflicts, and offered insights we dismissed as primitive. Now, in their absence, we face the consequences of our arrogance. The broadcast continued for an hour. Thelius detailed every failure, every moment when human advice had been ignored, every assumption that had proven false. The Archon did not ask humans to return or beg for forgiveness. Instead, Thelius simply acknowledged the truth and left the choice of what to do next to the entire coalition. The response was immediate and divided. Some species were outraged at this betrayal of elder species authority. Others felt relief that someone had finally said what they had been thinking. A dozen more civilizations immediately withdrew from the coalition, no longer willing to follow leaders who had demonstrated such catastrophic judgment. But something else happened too. Individual species began reaching out to human territories, not as supplicants but as potential partners. They proposed trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and collaborative research projects. They approached humanity with respect and genuine curiosity about perspectives they had previously dismissed. Humanity responded cautiously but positively. They did not rejoin the coalition, but they built new relationships with individual species who were willing to treat them as equals. 2 years after the quiet departure, Archon Thelius visited a human colony world called New Haven. It was a beautiful planet, terraformed through techniques that combined human intuition with alien technology in ways neither could have achieved alone. The colony was home to 17 different species, all living together without the rigid hierarchies of the coalition. Rachel Morgan met Thelius at the spaceport. She was working as the colony's coordinator, a position elected by the residents regardless of species. Welcome to New Haven, Archon Thelius, Rachel said warmly. What brings you to our little corner of space? I wanted to see what you built after leaving us. I wanted to understand what the coalition could have been if we had not been blinded by our own assumptions. They walked through the colony together. Thelius observed the easy mixing of species, the lack of designated hierarchies, the way problems were solved through discussion rather than authority. It was messy and inefficient by coalition standards, but it was also vibrant and creative and remarkably effective. Do you regret leaving? Thelius asked. Rachel considered the question seriously. No. We regret that it was necessary, but leaving was the right choice. We couldn't keep diminishing ourselves to fit into your definitions. We needed space to be fully human, to value our own strengths instead of constantly apologizing for not being more like you. And the coalition? Still exists, though much reduced. Some species left entirely. Others maintained nominal membership but built their own networks. A few elder species still cling to the old ways, but most have learned to be more flexible. The galaxy is more fragmented now, but also more diverse and innovative. Whether that's better or worse depends on your perspective. Thelius's energy patterns shifted to colors representing sadness and acceptance. We could have had unity and diversity. We chose unity through conformity instead, and we lost both. Maybe, Rachel said gently. But you're learning. Change takes time, especially for beings who measure their lives in millennia. The coalition is still here, still trying to figure out how to govern a diverse galaxy. Perhaps someday it will succeed. Just not in the way you originally imagined. They reached an observation platform overlooking the colony's central valley. Thelius could see the evidence of multiple species working together, not because some elder authority directed them, but because cooperation benefited everyone. What advice would you give the coalition now? Thelius asked. Stop trying to lead and start trying to serve. Understand that there are many kinds of intelligence, many paths to wisdom, many ways to be advanced. Value contribution over credentials. Listen more than you speak. Accept that being first doesn't make you best, and being different doesn't make you wrong. Rachel smiled. Basically, treat other species the way you would want to be treated if your positions were reversed. Simple advice, Thelius observed. Simple, but not easy. It requires letting go of pride and admitting that you have things to learn from beings you considered inferior. That's hard for anyone, but especially hard for species who have been powerful for thousands of years. Thelius departed New Haven with much to consider. The Archon returned to what remained of the coalition, not to the Grand Council where pride still reigned, but to the working levels where species were desperately trying to solve daily challenges. There, Thelius began teaching what had been learned from humanity. Not their techniques, which were too intuitive for most elder species to replicate, but their attitudes. The value of listening, of admitting ignorance, of trying approaches that seemed illogical but proved effective. It was slow work. Many resisted these lessons, preferring the comfort of old certainties even as those certainties crumbled around them. But some understood, and they began building something new from the ruins of the old coalition. The galaxy had changed. Humanity's quiet departure had left a vacuum that forced every species to examine their assumptions about advancement, authority, and worth. Some failed that examination and faded into isolation. Others grew and adapted, finding new ways to cooperate and thrive. And humanity, free from the burden of constantly proving themselves to beings who would never fully value them, built a civilization that reflected their true nature, chaotic, emotional, intuitive, and remarkably effective precisely because it embraced rather than suppressed those qualities. Years later, historians would mark the human withdrawal as the end of the Third Coalition era and the beginning of something new. A galaxy where advancement was measured not in years but in wisdom, where leadership came from service rather than authority, and where diversity was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. It was not the unity that the coalition's founders had envisioned. But it was something better, a galaxy where every species could find its place not by conforming to someone else's definition of advancement, but by contributing its unique strengths to the tapestry of civilization. And in quiet corners throughout that galaxy, former coalition species looked at human territories and whispered a phrase that would have been unthinkable just years before, perhaps they were right all along.